let's be honest. We've all heard the jokes about hospital food, right? But what if I told you that that kind of sad-looking meal tray is actually a super powerful form of medicine? Seriously, forget all the stereotypes because today we are going to unpack the incredible science that turns simple, everyday food into a serious tool for healing.
I mean, have you ever wondered about that? Why is it always jello, broth, and ice cream on the menu? It seems like the last thing you'd want when you're feeling awful. But trust me on this, there is a very deliberate and actually pretty fascinating method to all this culinary madness.
So, to really get this, let's meet Alex. Picture this, they're in the hospital and their body is in an all-out war to heal itself. And that kind of fight, it takes a ton of energy. We're talking fuel from food. But here's the big problem, the real catch-22. When you are truly sick, the absolute last thing on your mind is eating. And that right there, that's what we call the hospital hunger problem. So, what do you do? What happens when a patient like Alex just can't or really won't eat? Well, that's when nurses kick into gear with a protocol designed to gently, coax the body back into accepting some nutrition. And the first few steps are actually pretty basic, and they make a ton of sense when you think about it. First off, you can't really eat lying flat on your back, right? So, step one, sit the patient up. Next, they've got to get any pain or nausea under control, because, who feels like eating when they're in pain or feel sick? And instead of dropping off 3 big, kind of intimidating meals, they'll offer small, frequent bites. It's all about gently waking up that digestive system.
Okay, so what if that doesn't work? What if for Alex these simple steps just aren't cutting it? When a patient is just too ill to take anything by mouth, that's when medical science has to step in with some more advanced ways to get that critical fuel into the body.
This is what's known as enteral feeding, or you've probably heard of it as tube feeding. Now, the key thing to understand here is that this is for patients whose gut, their stomach and intestines, is working totally fine. The problem is they just can't swallow safely. Maybe they've had a stroke, for example. So this method just bypasses the problem area and delivers a perfectly balanced liquid diet right to where it needs to go. Now, because that special formula is providing this constant, slow drip of energy, it's also got sugars in it. And what that can do is cause blood glucose levels to go up, even in people who aren't diabetic. So it's super important for nurses to keep a really close eye on blood sugar, just to make sure the body is handling this new fuel source the right way. And hey, here's some great news. Alex is starting to turn a corner. They're on the mend, and they're ready to start eating again. But, you don't just go from a feeding tube to a steak dinner. Nope. It's a very careful step-by-step journey that we call climbing the diet ladder. So this whole journey usually starts at the very bottom rung of the ladder, a status called NPO. It's Latin, nil per os, which literally just means nothing by mouth. It's basically giving the digestive system a complete rest. Now, sometimes there are little exceptions, like maybe some ice chips or a tiny sip of water to take a pill, but that's about it. Okay, I absolutely love this next part, because this one simple idea perfectly explains the next big step up the ladder. Seriously, this one sentence captures the entire difference between the next 2 diets Alex is about to try. So the first real eating step is a clear liquid diet. And it is exactly what it sounds like. If you can see through it, it counts. Aha! This is where our old friends Jell-O and broth finally come in. They're really just sugar, water, and electrolytes. Super, super easy for the body to digest. Once Alex can handle that, they graduate to full liquids. And that's where you start to see creamy or opaque things like ice cream or, you guessed it, that coffee with the cream. It's still really gentle, but now we're adding more calories and a little more substance. All right, as Alex keeps getting stronger, the climb continues. The next rung up is often a pureed diet, so food that's been blended until it's totally smooth. After that, mechanical soft. Think soft-cooked, finely chopped foods that don't require a lot of chewing. You see how this works? Each step is a carefully planned test, just to challenge the digestive system a little more without totally overwhelming it. So, look at that. Alex has made it all the way to the top of the ladder and is eating solid food again. That is fantastic. But the journey isn't over, not by a long shot, because now food becomes an even more precise form of medicine, one that's tailored specifically to whatever Alex's underlying condition is. And this is where nutrition gets surgically precise. So for example, if someone has a heart condition, they'll get a low sodium diet. And why is that? Well, think of salt as a magnet for water in your body. Less salt means less extra fluid for an already tired heart to have to pump around. Or what about diabetes? It's a carb-balanced diet. notice I didn't say no carbs, but the right carbs to stop those blood sugar roller coasters. For kidney disease, there's something called a renal diet that gives the body's filters, the kidneys, a much-needed break. The food itself is literally part of the treatment plan.
And you know what? All of these special diets are built on the same basic foundation: macronutrients. We're talking about finding the perfect balance of carbs for energy, protein for repairing tissue, and fats for a whole bunch of other essential jobs. That balance is the cornerstone of any healthy diet, whether you're in the hospital or not.
Okay, so let's zoom in a bit from the big stuff, the macros, to the small stuff, like electrolytes. Honestly, the best way to think about electrolytes is like the electrical wiring for your body. I'm serious. These super important minerals, like sodium and potassium, they carry the tiny electrical charges that power everything. Your heartbeat, your nerve signals, you name it. They are absolutely 100% non-negotiable for life.
And get ready for this, because this is a really cool fact. You know how we're always told to eat a banana for potassium when we get a muscle cramp, right? Well, it turns out that more often than not, the real culprit is actually a lack of sodium that you've lost through sweat. That is why you hear about some elite athletes drinking pickle juice. It's because it's packed with the sodium their muscles are literally screaming for. How wild is that? All right, we're almost there. So finally, to make absolutely sure that Alex's recovery stays perfectly on track, the whole clinical team keeps what is basically an internal balance sheet for the body. They are meticulously tracking every single thing that goes in and every single thing that comes out. In hospital lingo, they just call this I&O, which stands for intake and output. Intake is pretty straightforward. It's all the liquid going in. IV fluids, stuff they drink, tube feeds, even those little ice chips count. And output is, well, all the liquid coming out. The goal here is simple but absolutely critical. You gotta keep those two numbers as balanced as possible. And when it comes to output, there is one number that nurses watch like a hawk: 30 milliliters per hour. That's it. That is the bare minimum amount of urine a patient should be putting out. It's a super critical real-time signal of how hydrated a patient is, and even more importantly, how well their kidneys are working. If that number starts to drop, it's one of the very first warning signs that something might be wrong. So, when you think about it, from a simple cup of Jell-O all the way to a perfectly calculated electrolyte balance, it's crystal clear, isn't it? Hospital food isn't a joke. It's a precise and incredibly powerful tool for healing. And really, that leaves us with one big takeaway. If nutrition can be this deliberate, this impactful when we are at our absolute sickest, just imagine its power to keep us healthy and thriving every single day.